Sarah Chun sat in the corner of the research lab, her fingers dancing across the holographic keyboard while her colleagues whispered behind her back. The 24-year-old programmer had joined the Galactic Defense Initiative 6 months ago, fresh out of the academy with top honors, but nobody seemed to remember that anymore. "Look at her, still playing with those useless algorithms," Marcus sneered from across the room. The senior programmer had made it his personal mission to remind everyone that Sarah was the youngest person ever assigned to the classified Omega project. Command only put her here because of diversity quotas. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she kept typing. The lines of code flowing across her screen were far from useless, though she couldn't tell anyone what she was really working on. While the rest of the team focused on upgrading weapon systems and defensive shields, Sarah had been secretly developing something much more dangerous. The Omega Project was humanity's last resort against the Zephyrian Empire, an alien race that had been systematically conquering star systems across the galaxy. Their technology was centuries ahead of human capabilities, and their ships could adapt to any weapon humans threw at them. Every battle ended the same way, complete human defeat. Commander Reynolds walked into the lab, his weathered face showing the stress of another failed engagement. "Team meeting in 5 minutes," he announced. "We just lost the Kepler system. The Zephyrians destroyed our entire fleet in under an hour." The room fell silent. Sarah looked up from her work, her heart sinking. Kepler was home to 12 million civilians, and now it was under alien control. She thought about her younger brother Jake, who was stationed on a mining colony in the Outer Rim. How long before the Zephyrians reached him too? During the meeting, the team discussed the same failed strategies they'd been trying for months. Bigger guns, stronger shields, faster ships. Nothing worked against an enemy that could evolve their defenses in real time. Sarah wanted to speak up about her project, but she knew what would happen. They'd dismiss her ideas like they always did. "We need fresh thinking," Dr. Elena Vasquez, the project director, said with frustration. "The conventional approach isn't working. Maybe we should ask the intern for her opinion," Marcus said sarcastically, gesturing towards Sarah. "I'm sure she has all the answers." Several team members chuckled, and Sarah felt her face burn with embarrassment. She was about to stay quiet, like always, when something inside her snapped. "Actually, I do have an idea." The room went quiet. Commander Reynolds raised an eyebrow. "Let's hear it, Chun." Sarah stood up, her legs shaking slightly. "What if we're approaching this wrong? Instead of trying to match their technology, what if we exploited their overconfidence? The Zephyrians always adapt to our weapons because they can analyze and counter them. But what if we gave them something they couldn't adapt to?" Marcus rolled his eyes. "And what would that be? Magic?" "No," Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. "Code. Pure, destructive code that targets their adaptation systems themselves." Dr. Vasquez leaned forward with interest. "Explain." "I've been studying captured Zephyrian technology fragments from the last battle. Their ships use a central processing core that manages all adaptations. If we could inject a specific type of virus into that core, we could turn their greatest strength into their weakness." The room was dead silent now. Sarah pulled up her hidden files on the main screen, revealing months of secret work. Complex algorithms and viral code structures filled the display, unlike anything the team had seen before. "This is impossible," whispered Dr. Kim, the team's cybersecurity expert. "The Zephyrian systems are completely alien. Our code shouldn't even be able to interface with their technology." "It can't," Sarah admitted. "Not directly. But I found something interesting in those fragments. The Zephyrians didn't build their adaptation technology from scratch. They stole it from another race they conquered centuries ago, a race that used quantum-based programming languages similar to our own." She highlighted a section of alien code on the screen. "See these patterns? They're using modified versions of logic gates that were originally designed by carbon-based life forms. The Zephyrians kept the core architecture because it worked, but they never fully understood it. That creates vulnerabilities." Commander Reynolds studied the screen intently. "What kind of vulnerabilities?" "Buffer overflows, recursive loops, memory corruption, all the classic exploits, but hidden beneath layers of alien modifications. I've spent months mapping their system architecture and developing a virus that can slip past their defenses by disguising itself as routine adaptation data. The team exchanged glances. Sarah could see the skepticism in their eyes, mixed with something else, hope. Even if this works, Marcus said, how would we deploy it? Their ships don't exactly accept file transfers from human vessels. Sarah smiled for the first time in weeks. That's the beautiful part. We don't need to send it to them. They'll download it themselves. She brought up a tactical display showing recent battle patterns. The Zephyrians always analyze our weapons after each engagement. They capture energy signatures, scan debris, and study our tactics to improve their defenses. What if we build a weapon specifically designed to be captured? Something that looks like a failed prototype, but contains the virus in its core programming. Dr. Vasquez was nodding slowly. A Trojan horse. Exactly. We create a fake experimental weapon with intentionally obvious flaws. Let them capture it, and when they analyze it, the virus uploads itself into their systems through their own scanning protocols. The excitement in the room was palpable, but Marcus wasn't convinced. This is pure fantasy. You're asking us to bet humanity's future on the programming skills of someone who's been here 6 months. I say we stick to proven methods. Proven methods that have failed every single time, Sarah shot back. How many more systems do we lose while we keep trying the same approach? Commander Reynolds held up his hand for silence. Chun, how long would you need to finalize this virus? The core code is already complete, Sarah said. I just need to package it into a convincing decoy weapon and run final tests. Give me 72 hours. Absolutely not, Marcus protested. Command will never approve resources for this wild theory from a junior programmer. But Commander Reynolds was already reaching for his communicator. Dr. Vasquez, I want a full security review of Chen's project within the hour. If her work checks out, we're moving forward. As the meeting broke up, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and terror. For months, she'd been working in secret, knowing that her idea was either brilliant or completely insane. Now she was about to find out which. Dr. Kim approached her desk as she was organizing her files. Sarah, I have to ask, how did you even think to approach the problem this way? This kind of cross-species code analysis is theoretical at best. Sarah looked up from her screen. My grandmother was a World War II codebreaker, she said quietly. She always told me that the best way to defeat an enemy isn't to match their strength, but to find the weakness they don't know they have. As the lab emptied out, Sarah remained at her workstation, staring at the lines of code that might save humanity. She thought about all the whispered comments and dismissive looks she'd endured. Tomorrow, she'd find out if the deadweight intern could really shock everyone. The cursor blinked steadily on her screen, waiting for her final command. Sarah took a deep breath and began typing. She had 72 hours to prove that sometimes the most dangerous weapon is the one your enemy never sees coming to security review came back clean, but that didn't stop the doubters. Word of Sarah's project had spread through the facility like wildfire, and opinions were sharply divided. Half the staff thought she was humanity's secret weapon, while the other half believed she was wasting precious time on impossible theories. Sarah barely slept during the next 48 hours. She worked through meals, surviving on energy drinks and determination. The virus was more complex than anything she'd ever coded before. It had to be smart enough to fool advanced alien scanners, subtle enough to avoid detection, and devastating enough to cripple an entire fleet. Dr. Vasquez found her slumped over her keyboard at 3 in the morning, code still scrolling across multiple screens. Sarah, you need rest. This project won't succeed if you collapse from exhaustion. I'm fine, Sarah mumbled, though her eyes were bloodshot and her hands were shaking slightly. Just need to finish the recursive deletion sequence. What exactly does this virus do once it's inside their system? Dr. Vasquez asked, pulling up a chair. Sarah straightened up, suddenly more alert. Explaining her work always energized her. The Zephyrian adaptation system works like a massive learning algorithm. Every time they encounter a new weapon, it analyzes the threat and develops countermeasures. The beauty is that all their ships are networked together. When one ship learns something, they all learn it instantly. She highlighted different sections of code as she spoke. My virus exploits that network. Once it's inside one ship's system, it spreads to the entire fleet through their own communication protocols. But instead of helping them adapt, it feeds false data into their learning algorithm. False data? Imagine their system is like a calculator, and every battle teaches it new math. The virus makes the calculator think that 2 plus 2 equals 5. At first, the errors are small enough to go unnoticed. But as the virus spreads and multiplies, the errors compound exponentially. Dr. Vasquez looked impressed despite herself. How long before the system fails completely? According to my simulations, total adaptive failure occurs within 6 to 8 hours of initial infection. After that, their ships lose the ability to counter any human weapons. They become sitting ducks. The next morning brought a new crisis. Commander Reynolds burst into the lab with grim news. The Zephyrians have launched a massive offensive. Intelligence reports at least 200 ships heading for the Sol system. They'll be here in 96 hours. The room erupted in panicked conversations. Earth itself was under threat, and humanity's most advanced fleet numbered only 60 ships. Without the adaptive advantage, it would be a slaughter. Is the virus ready? Commander Reynolds asked Sarah directly. The core code is complete, she replied, but I still need to build the delivery system. The decoy weapon has to be convincing enough that they'll want to study it instead of just destroying it. Marcus stood up from his workstation, his face pale. This is insane. We're going to risk everything on untested code written by someone who graduated 6 months ago. I'm filing a formal objection with High Command. You do that, Commander Reynolds said coldly. But while you're filing paperwork, Chum will be working to save our planet. Sarah spent the next 24 hours designing the perfect decoy. It had to look like humanity's most advanced weapon while being fundamentally flawed in obvious ways. She created an energy cannon that appeared to use revolutionary new plasma containment technology, but with deliberate instabilities that would make it useless in actual combat. The real genius was hiding the virus in the weapon's targeting system. When the Zephyrians scanned the device, they'd naturally focus on the impressive plasma technology while the virus quietly uploaded itself through the targeting computer's diagnostic protocols. Dr. Kim reviewed her work with growing amazement. Sarah, this is incredibly sophisticated. The way you've layered the deception is brilliant. They'll think they're studying a failed weapon when they're actually downloading their own destruction. But not everyone was impressed. Marcus had spent the day rallying opposition to the project among the senior staff. Look at the facts, he argued during an emergency meeting. We're trusting the fate of humanity to unproven technology. What happens when this virus fails, and we've wasted our last chance to mount a real defense? Admiral Harper, who had arrived from Earth Command, studied Sarah's technical specifications with a skeptical expression. Miss Chun, I've reviewed your personnel file. You've never worked on military systems before joining this project. How can we be certain this will work? Sarah felt the familiar burn of embarrassment, but she forced herself to stay calm. Admiral, you're right that I'm inexperienced with military applications. But that's actually an advantage here. The Zephyrians have been fighting our military minds for decades. They understand how we think tactically. They won't expect a completely different approach. That's not an answer, Admiral Harper replied. I need guarantees, not theories. There are no guarantees in war, Sarah said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. But I can give you mathematical probabilities. Based on my analysis of their system architecture, the virus has an 87% chance of successful deployment and a 93% chance of causing critical system failures once deployed. The room fell silent. Those were better odds than any conventional battle plan could offer. Admiral Harper studied her for a long moment. And if it fails? Then humanity fights one last conventional battle and probably loses, Sarah admitted. But if we don't try this, we're guaranteed to lose. The Zephyrians have adapted to every strategy we've ever used. Dr. Vasquez spoke up. Admiral, I've worked with Sarah for 6 months. Her approach to problem solving is unlike anything I've seen. She doesn't think like a military strategist or even like a conventional programmer. She thinks like someone who's never been told that something is impossible. While the debate raged around her, Sarah noticed a communication alert flashing on her screen. An encrypted message from the Outer Rim territories. Her heart skipped as she recognized the sender code. It was from Jake's mining colony. The message was brief, but terrifying. Zephyrian scouts detected in system. Full invasion fleet expected within hours. All defensive positions compromised. Tell Mom I love her. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. Her brother was about to face the same fate as billions of other humans who had stood in the Zephyrians' path. The virus wasn't just about saving Earth anymore. It was about saving Jake and everyone like him. She stood up abruptly, interrupting the ongoing argument. Admiral, I need to tell you something about the timeline. We don't have 96 hours anymore. The room turned to look at her. What do you mean? Admiral Harper demanded. The Zephyrians aren't just coming for Earth. They're hitting multiple systems simultaneously. My brother just sent word that his colony is under attack. If we're going to deploy this virus, it has to be now, while their fleet is still coordinated and networked together. Admiral Harper's expression darkened. How long do we have? Sarah pulled up the tactical display. The main fleet will be in weapons range of Earth in 78 hours. But there's a smaller advance group that will arrive in 18 hours. They always send scouts to analyze our defenses before the main attack. 18 hours, Admiral Harper muttered. Can your decoy weapon be ready by then? Sarah looked at her screens, calculating rapidly. Yes, but barely. I'll need every available fabrication unit in the facility working simultaneously. Done, Commander Reynolds said immediately. Whatever you need. Admiral Harper held up his hand. Wait, Miss Chun, I need you to understand something. If we deploy your virus against the advanced scouts, and it fails, we'll have shown our hand to the main fleet. They'll be prepared for any similar attacks. And if we don't deploy it, Sarah replied, the scouts will report back on our defensive positions, and the main fleet will destroy us anyway. Admiral, we're out of safe options. Marcus made one final attempt to stop the project. This is madness. We're betting everything on the work of a junior programmer who's been here less than a year. Sarah finally snapped. Stop calling me junior, she said, her voice carrying across the entire lab. I graduated top of my class from the academy. I have 3 advanced degrees in quantum programming and xenotechnology analysis. I've spent 6 months studying Zephyrian technology that none of you even bothered to look at because you were too focused on building bigger guns. The room was dead quiet. Sarah continued, her confidence growing with every word. You want to know why I can do what none of you could? Because I didn't assume it was impossible. While you were all trying to outmuscle an enemy that's centuries ahead of us, I was looking for the one thing they never expected. Their own overconfidence turned against them. Admiral Harper studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. 16 hours, Miss Chun. Can you do it? Give me a team and full fabrication access, and I'll have your weapon ready in 14, Sarah replied. As the lab erupted into activity around her, Sarah felt a strange sense of calm. The next few hours would determine whether she was humanity's salvation or its greatest disappointment. But for the first time since joining the project, she wasn't afraid of the answer. The next 14 hours passed in a blur of frantic activity. Sarah barely left her workstation as teams of engineers and fabrication specialists worked around the clock to build her decoy weapon. The device itself was impressive to look at. A sleek energy cannon with exotic plasma containment coils and quantum targeting arrays that pulsed with blue light. Dr. Kim coordinated the hardware teams, while Sarah focused on the final software integration. The virus had to be perfectly embedded within the weapon's targeting protocols, hidden so deep that even a most thorough scan wouldn't detect it until it was too late. How's the power coupling coming along? Sarah asked the chief engineer, her voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "We're at 92% efficiency," he replied. "Any higher and the containment field becomes stable. We need those microfractures in the plasma chamber to make this thing look genuinely flawed." That was the key to the whole deception. The weapon had to appear revolutionary, but fundamentally broken. Sarah had designed it to look like humanity's desperate attempt at a superweapon, one that failed due to engineering limitations rather than poor design concepts. Marcus had been suspiciously quiet all morning, but Sarah noticed him hovering near the communication terminals. When she finally confronted him, his face was flushed with guilt. "What did you do?" she demanded. "I sent a detailed report to Earth Command," he admitted. "They deserve to know the full scope of what we're attempting here." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Marcus, if this information gets intercepted by Zephyrian intelligence, it could compromise everything. They'll know exactly what to look for." "Maybe that's for the best," Marcus replied defensively. "If this plan fails, at least humanity will know who to blame." Before Sarah could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Commander Reynolds' voice echoed over the intercom. "All personnel to battle stations. Long-range sensors have detected the Zephyrian advance fleet. Estimated arrival in 4 hours." For hours. They were ahead of schedule, and Sarah's weapon wasn't quite ready. She raced back to her workstation, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she made final adjustments to the virus code. Dr. Vasquez appeared at her shoulder. "Sarah, we need to talk about deployment strategy. How do we ensure the Zephyrians actually capture the weapon instead of destroying it?" "We make it too tempting to ignore," Sarah replied without looking up from her screen. "The weapon needs to be deployed from a ship that appears to be attempting a desperate last stand. Something that looks heroic but doomed." "Which ship?" Commander Reynolds asked, joining the conversation. Sarah hesitated. This was the part of the plan she'd been dreading. It has to be a volunteer mission. The ship deploying the weapon won't survive the encounter. The pilot needs to make it look like they're trying to use humanity's secret superweapon in a final desperate attack. The room fell silent. Everyone understood what that meant. "I'll do it," Commander Reynolds said immediately. "Absolutely not." Admiral Harper's voice came from behind them. He'd been monitoring the situation from the command center. "We need you alive, Commander. I'll assign one of our expendable pilots." "No," Sarah said firmly. "It can't be just any pilot. The Zephyrians are smart enough to recognize a suicide mission. The pilot has to genuinely believe they're deploying a real weapon. They have to think there's a chance of survival, or their behavior won't be convincing." Dr. Vasquez looked horrified. "You're suggesting we send someone to die without telling them it's a one-way mission?" "I'm suggesting we send someone with hope," Sarah corrected. "The weapon has to fail in a specific way. It needs to overload catastrophically while appearing to target the lead Zephyrian ship. The pilot will have maybe 30 seconds to escape in a pod before the ship explodes." "Maybe 30 seconds?" Admiral Harper raised an eyebrow. "I can't make any guarantees," Sarah admitted. "The plasma overload will be real. That's what makes the failure convincing. But I've designed the targeting system to give maximum warning before containment collapse." As if summoned by their conversation, Lieutenant Torres approached the group. The young pilot had volunteered for every dangerous mission since joining the Defense Force, and her courage was legendary among the fleet. "Admiral, requesting permission to pilot the deployment mission," she said with a crisp salute. Admiral Harper studied her carefully. "Lieutenant, this is an experimental weapon with uncertain capabilities. The survival odds are extremely low." "Understood, sir. But if this weapon works, it could save millions of lives. That's worth the risk." Sarah felt a stab of guilt as she looked at Lieutenant Torres' determined face. The pilot was maybe 25 years old, with bright eyes and an unshakable belief in the mission. She had no idea that the weapon she'd be deploying was designed to fail. "The weapon will be ready in 2 hours," Sarah said quietly. "Final systems check in 90 minutes. As the team dispersed to make final preparations, Sarah found herself alone with her code one last time. The virus was elegant in its simplicity, just a few thousand lines that could bring down an entire civilization. But, staring at the screen, She couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something important. Dr. Kim joined her at the workstation. Second thoughts. Third and fourth thoughts, Sarah admitted. This virus is more powerful than anything I've ever created. What if it works too well? What if it doesn't just disable their adaptation systems, but crashes their entire infrastructure? Would that be such a bad thing? Dr. Kim asked. They've been systematically destroying every human colony they encounter. I don't know, Sarah said honestly. I designed this to level the playing field, not to commit genocide. But once it's deployed, I have no way to control how far it spreads or what it ultimately destroys. An hour later, the weapon was loaded onto Lieutenant Torres' ship. Sarah watched through the observation deck as the sleek fighter craft was fitted with the decoy cannon. The device looked impressive mounted on the ship's undercarriage, exactly the kind of desperate superweapon humanity might deploy as a last resort. Lieutenant Torres ran through her final mission briefing with Commander Reynolds. The plan was simple. Engage the lead scout ships, deploy the experimental weapon against the largest target, and evacuate if possible when the system overloaded. Remember, Commander Reynolds told her, this weapon is highly unstable. The moment you see plasma fluctuations in the red zone, you need to eject immediately. Understood, sir. How long do I have before overload? Approximately 30 to 45 seconds from first warning, Commander Reynolds lied smoothly. Sarah had told him the real timeline was closer to 15 seconds, but there was no point in making Torres more nervous than necessary. As the lieutenant headed to her ship, Sarah made an impulsive decision. She intercepted Torres in the corridor. "Lieutenant, wait," Sarah called out. Torres turned, her helmet tucked under her arm. "Miss Chun, right? The programmer who designed the weapon." "Yes. I wanted to tell you something about the deployment sequence. When you activate the weapon, you'll see a series of blue warning lights before the main overload indicator. Those aren't in your briefing, but they're important." Sarah pulled out a small datapad and quickly sketched the weapon's control interface. If you see 3 blue lights in sequence, you have maybe 20 seconds to eject. Don't wait for the red overload warning. By then, it might be too late. Lieutenant Torres studied the sketch carefully. "Why isn't this in the official briefing?" "Because it's based on theoretical calculations, not tested data," Sarah said, which was technically true. "I can't officially recommend changing your procedure based on untested theory. But unofficially," Sarah met her eyes directly. "Unofficially, I want you to come home alive." Lieutenant Torres smiled and extended her hand. "Thank you for the heads up. And thank you for giving us a chance to fight back." As Sarah watched the fighter launch into space, she felt the weight of what she'd set in motion. In less than 2 hours, they'd know if her months of secret work would save humanity or doom it to an even worse fate. The Zephyrian Advanced Fleet appeared on long-range scanners 40 minutes later. 5 ships, each the size of a human battlecruiser, moving in perfect formation toward Earth. Their sleek, organic-looking hulls seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, giving them an ominous presence against the star field. Lieutenant Torres' fighter was a tiny speck compared to the alien vessels, but Sarah knew that was exactly what they needed. The Zephyrians would see a single human ship attempting a desperate attack with an unknown weapon. Their curiosity and arrogance would make them want to capture and study the device rather than simply destroying it. "All stations report ready," Commander Reynolds announced. "Lieutenant Torres, you are cleared for weapon deployment." Sarah held her breath as she watched the tactical display. Everything depended on the next few minutes. Either her virus would begin the downfall of the Zephyrian Empire, or humanity would face its darkest hour with one less fighter and one fewer hope. Lieutenant Torres' fighter streaked through space toward the Zephyrian Advanced Fleet, the experimental weapon glowing ominously beneath her ship. Sarah watched the tactical display with her heart pounding as the distance between the human fighter and alien ships rapidly decreased. "Contact with enemy fleet in 30 seconds. Torres reported over the comm. Her voice was steady despite the impossible odds she faced. The Zephyrian ships responded exactly as Sarah had predicted. Instead of immediately destroying the approaching fighter, They spread into a defensive formation designed to capture rather than kill. They wanted to study whatever weapon the humans were desperate enough to deploy against overwhelming odds. Weapon Systems Online, Torres announced. Beginning attack run on lead vessel. Sarah gripped the edge of her console as she watched the fighter dive toward the largest Zephyrian ship. The alien vessel was easily 10 times the size of Torres' fighter, its hull covered in adaptive armor that shimmered with energy fields. Firing experimental weapon, Torres said. The plasma cannon activated with a brilliant flash of blue-white light. For a moment, it actually appeared to be working. The energy beam struck the Zephyrian ship's shields, causing massive overloads across their defensive systems. The aliens' adaptive technology immediately began analyzing the new weapon, trying to develop countermeasures. That was exactly what Sarah had been counting on. "I'm seeing massive plasma fluctuations," Torres reported, her voice now showing signs of concern. "The weapon's containment field is destabilizing faster than expected." Sarah closed her eyes. The overload was beginning right on schedule. In seconds, the weapon would suffer catastrophic failure, appearing to be nothing more than another human technological dead end. But as the Zephyrians analyzed the wreckage, they'd unknowingly download the virus into their systems. 3 blue warning lights are active, Torres said urgently. Initiating emergency ejection sequence. Sarah breathed a sigh of relief. Torres had remembered her unofficial warning and was evacuating with precious extra seconds to spare. The experimental weapon exploded in a spectacular display of plasma fire, completely destroying Torres' fighter, but leaving the escape pod intact. The Zephyrians immediately moved to capture both the wreckage and the escape pod, just as Sarah had predicted. "Torres is alive and in enemy custody," Commander Reynolds reported grimly. The weapon appeared to fail completely. "Appeared to," Sarah corrected quietly. Over the next hour, Sarah monitored long-range sensor readings as the Zephyrian ships conducted detailed scans of the weapon fragments. Their behavior patterns matched her simulations perfectly. They were methodically analyzing every component, trying to understand why the human superweapon had failed so dramatically. "I'm detecting massive data transmissions between the Zephyrian ships," Dr. Kim reported. "They're sharing analysis results across their entire network." Sarah smiled for the first time in days. "That's exactly what we want." The virus spreads through their communication protocols whenever they share skin data. But her satisfaction was short-lived. Admiral Harper approached her workstation with troubling news. "Miss Chun, we've received word from the Outer Rim. Your brother's colony successfully evacuated before the Zephyrian attack, but 3 other systems have fallen in the past 6 hours. The main invasion fleet is accelerating their timeline." Sarah's heart sank. "How long do we have?" 48 hours, maybe less. And that's if your virus actually works. "How will we know if it's successful?" "We'll know within the next 6 to 8 hours, Sarah replied. "If the virus is working, we should start seeing anomalies in Zephyrian ship behavior. Their adaptation systems will begin making increasingly poor decisions." As if on cue, Dr. Vasquez called out from her monitoring station. "I'm seeing something strange. The Zephyrian advance fleet just altered course. They're moving away from Earth instead of establishing orbital positions for the main attack." Sarah pulled up the tactical display, her excitement growing. "They're not retreating. Look at their formation. They're spreading out to optimize scanning coverage. The virus is already affecting their tactical algorithms." "How is that possible?" Admiral Harper demanded. "It's only been 2 hours since deployment. The Zephyrians share adaptation data in real time across their entire fleet," Sarah explained. "When one ship learns something, they all learn it instantly. But that also means when one ship gets infected, they all get infected instantly." Over the next few hours, the Zephyrian behavior became increasingly erratic. Their ships began making tactical decisions that defied all logic. They split their forces unnecessarily, exposed their flanks to potential attack, and repeatedly changed course without apparent reason. Marcus, who had been watching the displays with growing amazement, finally approached Sarah's workstation. "I owe you an apology," he said quietly. "I was wrong about your abilities. This virus is working exactly as you predicted." "It's working better than I predicted," Sarah admitted. "I expected the errors to accumulate gradually, but their adaptation system is failing faster than my model suggested." Dr. Kim looked up from her analysis screens. "Sarah, I'm seeing some concerning data patterns. The virus isn't just affecting their tactical systems. It's spreading into their life support and navigation networks too." Sarah's blood ran cold. "That shouldn't be possible. I specifically designed it to target only adaptation protocols." "Look at this." Dr. Kim highlighted sections of intercepted Zephyrian transmissions. Their ships use integrated systems where adaptation algorithms help manage everything from air recycling to engine efficiency. The virus is following those connections and corrupting secondary systems. "Oh no," Sarah whispered as the full implications hit her. "I didn't account for how deeply integrated their adaptation technology is. The virus isn't just disabling their defenses, it's killing their ships from the inside out." Admiral Harper studied the data with a grim expression. "Is that necessarily a bad thing?" "It is if we're trying to rescue Lieutenant Torres," Sarah replied. "She's on the lead ship, and, according to these readings, their life support systems are beginning to fail." The moral weight of her creation suddenly crashed down on Sarah. She had designed a precise surgical strike to level the playing field, but she had inadvertently created a weapon of mass destruction. The Zephyrian ships weren't just losing their military capabilities, they were dying. "Can we reverse it?" Commander Reynolds asked. Sarah shook her head. "The virus is self-replicating and spreading through their communication networks. Even if I could design a cure, there's no way to deliver it to their systems." "Then, we have a narrow window to act," Admiral Harper decided. "If the Zephyrian ships are going to fail catastrophically, we need to mount a rescue mission for Torres before their life support completely collapses." "That's suicide," Marcus protested. "We'd be flying directly into the middle of an alien fleet." "An alien fleet that's currently incapable of effective defense," Sarah pointed out. "According to my readings, their weapon systems are operating at maybe 60% efficiency and falling rapidly." Admiral Harper made the decision. "Commander Reynolds, prepare a fast attack ship for immediate launch. Take a small crew and extract Lieutenant Torres before those ships become death traps." As the rescue mission prepared to launch, Sarah made an impulsive decision. "Admiral, I request permission to join the rescue mission." "Absolutely not," Admiral Harper replied immediately. "You're too valuable to risk on a field operation." "With respect, sir, I understand the virus better than anyone. If Torres is trapped in a ship where the computer systems are failing randomly, you'll need someone who can predict what the virus will target next." Commander Reynolds considered this. She has a point. The Zephyrian ships are essentially giant computers having a nervous breakdown. Sarah might be the only person who can safely navigate their internal systems. Against his better judgment, Admiral Harper approved Sarah's participation in the rescue mission. As she suited up in combat gear for the first time in her life, Sarah reflected on how drastically her situation had changed. 3 days ago, she was the deadweight intern everyone ignored. Now she was humanity's secret weapon, racing to rescue a pilot from the middle of an alien fleet that her own creation was systematically destroying. The rescue ship launched with Sarah, Commander Reynolds, and 2 elite Marines aboard. As they approached the Zephyrian fleet, Sarah watched her virus work with horrified fascination. The alien ships were indeed dying, their sleek hulls now flickering with error lights and emergency signals. "Target ship located," the pilot announced. "But we've got a problem. Their docking bay controls appear to be malfunctioning. We might not be able to get inside." Sarah studied the sensor readings of the Zephyrian vessel. The virus has corrupted their airlock protocols, she realized. "But I can work around that. Give me access to your communication array." "What are you planning?" Commander Reynolds asked. Sarah's fingers flew across the control interface. "I'm going to hack into their ship directly and manually override the docking systems. It's risky if the virus detects my intrusion It might accelerate the system failures. "Do it," Reynolds ordered. As Sarah began her digital assault on the dying alien ship, she couldn't help but wonder if rescuing one human life was worth the risk of exposing her techniques to whatever Zephyrian computer systems were still functional. But, looking at Torres' location on the scanner, trapped in the bowels of a failing starship, she knew she had to try. The real test of her virus and her conscience was about to begin. Sarah's fingers danced across the control interface as she worked to hack into the dying Zephyrian ship. The vessel's computer systems were in chaos, with her virus spreading through every network like digital wildfire. What she saw on the diagnostic screens made her stomach turn. "Their life support is failing faster than I calculated," she reported grimly. "The virus has corrupted the atmospheric recycling algorithms. They're slowly suffocating in there." "How long does Torres have?" Commander Reynolds asked. Sarah ran quick calculations based on the error patterns she was seeing. "Maybe 20 minutes before the air becomes completely toxic. But the artificial gravity could fail at any moment. And if the containment fields around their power core collapse." She didn't need to finish. Everyone understood that they were racing against time to prevent both a rescue mission and a nuclear explosion. "I'm in," Sarah announced as she successfully bypassed the airlock controls. "Docking bay doors are opening, but I can't guarantee how long they'll stay functional." Their ship slid into the alien vessel's docking bay just as the massive doors began to shudder and spark. The Zephyrian technology was clearly far advanced from anything humans had built, but Sarah's virus was turning that sophistication into a weakness as complex systems failed in cascading patterns. The rescue team moved quickly through corridors that pulsed with bioluminescent emergency lighting. The ship's interior was unlike anything Sarah had imagined. Smooth curves and organic shapes that seemed grown rather than built. But now those elegant walls flickered with error displays and alien script. "Torres should be in holding Area 7, Commander Reynolds said, checking his scanner. 3 levels down, Section 12. As they moved deeper into the ship, Sarah noticed something disturbing. They hadn't encountered a single Zephyrian crew member, alive or dead. "Where is everyone?" she whispered. "Maybe they evacuated to another ship," suggested Corporal Martinez, one of the Marines. Sarah shook her head as she studied her portable scanner. "The virus has been spreading through their fleet communication network. If this ship's crew evacuated, they would have taken the infection with them to whatever vessel they boarded." The implications hit everyone simultaneously. The virus wasn't just disabling individual ships. It was potentially destroying the entire Zephyrian advance fleet. They found Lieutenant Torres in a cylindrical holding cell that seemed to be the only area of the ship where the lights weren't flickering ominously. She was conscious, but weak. Her breathing labored in the gradually thinning atmosphere. "About time," Torres said with a weak smile as Commander Reynolds worked to override the cell controls. "I was starting to think you'd forgotten about me." "Never," Reynolds replied. "Can you walk?" "I can try." Torres stood unsteadily. "What's happening to this ship?" "Everything started going crazy about an hour ago." Sarah helped support Torres as they made their way back toward the docking bay. "The experimental weapon worked, but not the way we expected. The Zephyrian ships are suffering massive system failures." "Good," Torres said fiercely. "Maybe now they'll think twice before attacking human colonies." But Sarah's expression remained troubled. As they moved through the corridors, her portable scanner was picking up data transmissions from other ships in the fleet. The virus had indeed spread to every vessel, and the results were catastrophic. Ships were losing power, life support was failing across the fleet, and several vessels appeared to be completely dead in space. "Sarah, we need to move faster," Commander Reynolds urged as the corridor lights began to dim around them. "This ship is dying." They reached the docking bay just as the first power core containment alarm began wailing throughout the ship. Their rescue vessel's engines were already spinning up when they tumbled through the airlock, and they launched just seconds before the docking bay doors seized permanently closed. As their ship pulled away from the Zephyrian vessel, Sarah watched through the viewport as the alien craft's lights flickered one final time and then went completely dark. Within minutes, all 5 ships in the advanced fleet had gone silent and begun drifting powerlessly through space. "My God," Lieutenant Torres whispered, staring at the dead fleet. "What do we do to them?" "We won," Commander Reynolds said, but his voice lacked any sense of triumph. The journey back to the research station was quiet. Sarah spent most of the flight monitoring long-range communications, trying to assess the full scope of what her virus had accomplished. The news was both better and worse than she had feared. The main Zephyrian invasion fleet had indeed halted their advance toward Earth. In fact, they appeared to have stopped moving entirely. Long-range sensors showed dozens of alien ships floating dead in space across multiple star systems. The virus had spread through their entire fleet communication network exactly as designed, but with far more devastating results than Sarah had intended. Admiral Harper was waiting for them in the station's command center when they returned. "Miss Chun, your virus has exceeded all expectations. The Zephyrian threat to Earth has been completely neutralized." "At what cost?" Sarah asked quietly. "We're still assessing the full scope, but preliminary reports suggest that every Zephyrian ship within 3 star systems has suffered total system failure. They're completely helpless." Dr. Vasquez approached Sarah with a mixture of awe and concern. "Sarah, we're detecting similar failures in Zephyrian installations on planets they've occupied. The virus has apparently spread to their ground-based computer networks as well." Sarah felt sick. "How many worlds are we talking about?" "At least 47 that we know of," Admiral Harper replied. "And the failures are still spreading as the virus propagates through their subspace communication networks." Lieutenant Torres, who had been listening to the briefing from a medical chair, spoke up weakly. "Sarah, you saved my life and probably saved Earth. Why do you look like someone died?" "Because someone probably did die," Sarah replied. "Maybe millions of someones. I designed a surgical strike, but I created a plague. The Zephyrians aren't just militarily defeated. Their entire technological civilization is collapsing." Marcus, who had been monitoring communication intercepts, added more disturbing news. "We're picking up distress signals from Zephyrian civilian installations. Hospitals, schools, residential areas, they're all losing power and life support." The room fell silent as everyone grasped the magnitude of what had occurred. Sarah's virus hadn't just won a battle or even a war. It had potentially committed genocide against an entire species. "What's done is done," Admiral Harper said finally. "The immediate threat to humanity has been eliminated." "But at what cost to our humanity?" Sarah asked. "I became exactly what I was trying to fight against. Someone who destroys entire civilizations." Dr. Vasquez placed a hand on Sarah's shoulder. "You couldn't have known how deeply integrated their technology was. You made decisions based on the information available at the time." Over the following weeks, the true scope of Sarah's virus became clear. The Zephyrian Empire, which had dominated this region of the galaxy for centuries, effectively ceased to exist. Their ships remained dead in space, their colonies went dark one by one, and their conquered territories were suddenly free for the first time in generations. Humanity began the complex process of establishing contact with liberated worlds and assessing the damage. Some systems had managed to maintain basic functions despite the technological collapse, but others faced humanitarian crises as infrastructure failed completely. Sarah found herself at the center of a moral and political firestorm. Some called her humanity's greatest hero, the programmer who had single-handedly saved the species from extinction. Others branded her a war criminal who had committed genocide through cyber warfare. But perhaps the most significant change was in Sarah herself. The quiet intern who had been dismissed as deadweight had become one of the most powerful and feared individuals in known space. Her colleagues no longer whispered behind her back. They watched her with a mixture of respect and wariness. 6 months after the deployment of the virus, Sarah received a communication that changed everything. It was from her brother Jake, now serving as part of a humanitarian mission to former Zephyrian territories. Sarah, his message began, I wanted you to know what we found in the Kepler system. The Zephyrians have been keeping humans in labor camps, but when their systems failed, they couldn't maintain the facilities. We've rescued over 2 million people who have been written off as dead. The message continued with similar reports from dozens of worlds. The collapse of Zephyrian technology had indeed caused suffering, but it had also freed countless beings who had been enslaved or imprisoned by the Empire. Sarah stared at her reflection in the darkened window of her new office. She now held the rank of Chief Technology Officer for the entire Galactic Defense Initiative. The young woman, looking back at her, bore little resemblance to the uncertain intern who had started this journey. She had learned that true power wasn't about being the strongest or the smartest. It was about being willing to take responsibility for impossible choices and live with the consequences. The girl who had been mocked as deadweight had revealed a kill code that shocked everyone, including herself. But as she watched the stars through her window, Sarah knew that her real test wasn't creating the virus that destroyed an empire. Her real test would be using her newfound influence to ensure that humanity never became the kind of civilization they had just defeated. The kill code had ended one chapter of galactic history. Now Sarah faced the much harder task of helping to write the next one. Sarah Chun sat in the corner of the research lab, her fingers dancing across the holographic keyboard while her colleagues whispered behind her back. The 24-year-old programmer had joined the Galactic Defense Initiative 6 months ago, fresh out of the academy with top honors, but nobody seemed to remember that anymore. Look at her, still playing with those useless algorithms. Marcus sneered from across the room. The senior programmer had made it his personal mission to remind everyone that Sarah was the youngest person ever assigned to the classified Omega project. Command only put her here because of diversity quotas. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she kept typing. The lines of code flowing across her screen were far from useless, though she couldn't tell anyone what she was really working on. While the rest of the team focused on upgrading weapon systems and defensive shields, Sarah had been secretly developing something much more dangerous. The Omega Project was humanity's last resort against the Zephyrian Empire, an alien race that had been systematically conquering star systems across the galaxy. Their technology was centuries ahead of human capabilities, and their ships could adapt to any weapon humans threw at them. Every battle ended the same way: complete human defeat. Commander Reynolds walked into the lab, his weathered face showing the stress of another failed engagement. Team meeting in 5 minutes, he announced. We just lost the Kepler system. The Zephyrians destroyed our entire fleet in under an hour. The room fell silent. Sarah looked up from her work, her heart sinking. Kepler was home to 12 million civilians, and now it was under alien control. She thought about her younger brother Jake, who was stationed on a mining colony in the Outer Rim. How long before the Zephyrians reach him too? During the meeting, the team discussed the same failed strategies they've been trying for months. Bigger guns, stronger shields, faster ships. Nothing worked against an enemy that could evolve their defenses in real time. Sarah wanted to speak up about her project, but she knew what would happen. They'd dismiss her ideas like they always did. We need fresh thinking, Dr. Elena Vasquez, the project director, said with frustration. The conventional approach isn't working. Maybe we should ask the intern for her opinion, Marcus said sarcastically, gesturing towards Sarah. I'm sure she has all the answers. Several team members chuckled, and Sarah felt her face burn with embarrassment. She was about to stay quiet like always when something inside her snapped. Actually, I do have an idea. The room went quiet. Commander Reynolds raised an eyebrow. Let's hear it, Chun. Sarah stood up, her legs shaking slightly. What if we're approaching this wrong? Instead of trying to match their technology, what if we exploited their overconfidence? The Zephyrians always adapt to our weapons because they can analyze and counter them. But what if we gave them something they couldn't adapt to? Marcus rolled his eyes. And what would that be? Magic? No, Sarah said, her voice growing stronger. Code. Pure, destructive code that targets their adaptation systems themselves. Dr. Vasquez leaned forward with interest. Explain. I've been studying captured Zephyrian technology fragments from the last battle. Their ships use a central processing core that manages all adaptations. If we could inject a specific type of virus into that core, we could turn their greatest strength into their weakness. The room was dead silent now. Sarah pulled up her hidden files on the main screen, revealing months of secret work. Complex algorithms and viral code structures filled the display, unlike anything the team had seen before. "This is impossible," whispered Dr. Kim, the team's cybersecurity expert. "The Zephyrian systems are completely alien. Our code shouldn't even be able to interface with their technology." "It can't," Sarah admitted. "Not directly, but I found something interesting in those fragments. The Zephyrians didn't build their adaptation technology from scratch. They stole it from another race they conquered centuries ago, a race that used quantum-based programming languages similar to our own." She highlighted a section of alien code on the screen. "See these patterns? They're using modified versions of logic gates that were originally designed by carbon-based life forms. The Zephyrians kept the core architecture because it worked, but they never fully understood it. That creates vulnerabilities." Commander Reynolds studied the screen intently. "What kind of vulnerabilities?" "Buffer overflows, recursive loops, memory corruption, all the classic exploits, but hidden beneath layers of alien modifications. I've spent months mapping their system architecture and developing a virus that can slip past their defenses by disguising itself as routine adaptation data." The team exchanged glances. Sarah could see the skepticism in their eyes, mixed with something else, hope. "Even if this works," Marcus said, "how will we deploy it? Their ships don't exactly accept file transfers from human vessels." Sarah smiled for the first time in weeks. "That's the beautiful part. We don't need to send it to them. They'll download it themselves." She brought up a tactical display showing recent battle patterns. "The Zephyrians always analyze our weapons after each engagement. They capture energy signatures, scan debris, and study our tactics to improve their defenses. What if we build a weapon specifically designed to be captured? Something that looks like a failed prototype, but contains the virus in its core programming." Dr. Vasquez was nodding slowly. "A Trojan horse." "Exactly. We create a fake experimental weapon with intentionally obvious flaws, let them capture it, and when they analyze it, the virus uploads itself into their systems through their own scanning protocols." The excitement in the room was palpable, but Marcus wasn't convinced. "This is pure fantasy. You're asking us to bet humanity's future on the programming skills of someone who's been here 6 months. I say we stick to proven methods." "Proven methods that have failed every single time," Sarah shot back. "How many more systems do we lose while we keep trying the same approach?" Commander Reynolds held up his hand for silence. "Chun, how long would you need to finalize this virus?" "The core code is already complete," Sarah said. "I just need to package it into a convincing decoy weapon and run final tests. Give me 72 hours. "Absolutely not," Marcus protested. "Command will never approve resources for this wild theory from a junior programmer." But Commander Reynolds was already reaching for his communicator. "Dr. Vasquez, I want a full security review of Chen's project within the hour. If her word checks out, we're moving forward." As the meeting broke up, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and terror. For months, she'd been working in secret, knowing that her idea was either brilliant or completely insane. Now she was about to find out which. Dr. Kim approached her desk as she was organizing her files. "Sarah, I have to ask, how did you even think to approach the problem this way? This kind of cross-species code analysis is theoretical at best." Sarah looked up from her screen. "My grandmother was a World War II codebreaker," she said quietly. "She always told me that the best way to defeat an enemy isn't to match their strength, but to find the weakness they don't know they have." As the lab emptied out, Sarah remained at her workstation, staring at the lines of code that might save humanity. She thought about all the whispered comments and dismissive looks she'd endured. Tomorrow, she'd find out if the deadweight in turn could really shock everyone. The cursor blinked steadily on her screen, waiting for her final command. Sarah took a deep breath and began typing. She had 72 hours to prove that sometimes the most dangerous weapon is the one your enemy never sees coming.